Captain Jake Murphy stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, staring at the massive alien ship that had just appeared on their screens. The vessel was unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was huge, at least 5 times the size of their exploration, shipped and covered in golden spikes that stuck out in all directions. Strange symbols glowed along its hull, and what looked like wings spread out from both sides. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," said Communications Officer Lisa Rodriguez, trying to keep her voice steady. She had been working communications for 10 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. "Put it on screen," Murphy ordered, straightening his uniform. First contact with an alien species was something every space captain dreamed about and feared at the same time. The main screen flickered. Suddenly they were looking at the most dramatic alien any of them had ever imagined. The creature stood, at least 8 feet tall, with purple skin and 4 arms. It wore elaborate golden armor that looked like it belonged in a museum, complete with a cape that seemed to float behind it without any wind. Its head was crowned with what appeared to be a metal headdress covered in jewels. "Greetings, pitiful creatures of this insignificant world," the alien began, its voice booming through the bridge speakers. "I am Admiral Zethkar of the mighty Zorvakian Galactic Empire, commander of the Eternal Fleet, destroyer of worlds, and bringer of cosmic justice to the unworthy." Science Officer Danny Chen had to cover his mouth with his hand. The alien's dramatic pose, with one arm raised to the sky and cape billowing, looked exactly like something from the old superhero movies his kids watched. "You stand before the infinite glory of our empire," Admiral Zethkar continued, now striking a different pose with both arms spread wide. "Your pathetic species shall bow before our divine right to rule all sentient life in this galaxy and beyond." Murphy glanced around his bridge. His crew was struggling not to laugh. Tactical Officer Karen White had turned her chair away from the screen, her shoulders shaking. Even his usually serious first officer, Commander Rick Brown, had a strange expression on his face. "We have conquered 1,000 worlds," the alien went on, his voice getting louder and more dramatic. "Entire civilizations have trembled at the mere mention of our name. The stars themselves weep at our approach." That was too much for Lisa Rodriguez. She let out a small giggle, then quickly covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide with horror at what she had just done during first contact. Admiral Zethkar paused his speech, tilting his head. "What was that sound, inferior being?" Murphy quickly hit the mute button. "Sorry, Admiral. Technical difficulties. Please continue." As I was saying, the alien resumed, now walking back and forth in what appeared to be a throne room, decorated with more gold and jewels than a pirate's treasure cave. "Your pitiful existence ends today, unless you surrender immediately to our infinite wisdom and power." Danny Chen leaned over to Murphy and whispered, "Sir, does he remind you of that villain from Galaxy Wars Episode 7? You know, the one with the ridiculous helmet?" Murphy tried to keep his face serious, but he could feel the corners of his mouth twitching. The alien's movements were so over the top, so theatrical, that it was like watching a one-man play about an evil emperor. "Citizens of this doomed world," Admiral Zethkar announced, raising what looked like a golden staff with a crystal on top. "You have exactly one of your planetary rotations to consider our generous offer of servitude. Refuse, and face the wrath of our infinite fleet." Behind the alien, Murphy could see other Zorvakians moving around. They all wore similar elaborate outfits and moved with the same dramatic flair. One of them was actually carrying what appeared to be a banner with the alien's face on it. "This is our final warning," the Admiral declared, pointing directly at the camera. "Submit to the eternal magnificence of the Zorvakian Empire, or be swept aside like dust before the cosmic winds of our destiny." The transmission ended with what could only be described as a dramatic light show. Golden beams of light shot across the alien bridge, while music that sounded like a cross between an opera and a movie soundtrack played in the background. The bridge of the USS Liberty was completely silent for about 5 seconds. Then Danny Chen snorted, trying to hold back laughter. That set off Lisa Rodriguez, who started giggling again. Within moments, the entire bridge crew was laughing. "Did you see that cape?" Karen White gasped between laughs. It was floating like he had his own personal wind machine. And the staff, added Chief Engineer Bobby Martinez, who had come up from the engine room when they detected the alien ship. I swear it was glowing just for dramatic effect. Murphy tried to restore order. All right, people, this is serious. We just made first contact with an alien species. Sir, said Rick Brown, still fighting a smile. With respect, did you hear what he called us? Pitiful creatures of an insignificant world. Who talks like that? Apparently aliens do, Murphy replied, but he was struggling not to laugh himself. The whole encounter had been so absurdly dramatic that it was hard to take seriously. Captain Lisa Rodriguez said, checking her instruments, "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. It looks like they're sending the same message to Earth and all our colonies." Murphy could only imagine how Earth Command was reacting to Admiral Zethkar's theatrical demands. Any response from home? Not yet, sir. But I'm getting private messages from other ships in the area. The USS Courage and USS Defiance both picked up the transmission. What are they saying? Lisa tried to keep her voice professional. Captain. Thompson from the Courage wants to know if this is some kind of joke. Captain Johnson from the Defiance is asking if we've been watching too many old movies and this is some kind of prank. Danny Chen was studying the readings from their encounter. Sir, their ship is definitely real and definitely advanced. But the energy signatures are strange. They're putting a lot of power into what appears to be purely decorative systems. Decorative systems, Murphy asked? Those golden spikes, the light shows, even that cape effect. Their ship is using significant energy just to look impressive. Bobby Martinez shook his head. They've got a ship that could probably destroy us, and they're using it to put on a light show, Sir Karen White said, checking her tactical display. Long-range sensors are picking up more ships approaching. Looks like a whole fleet. Murphy felt his amusement fade a bit. Funny or not, they were dealing with an unknown alien species that claimed to have conquered 1,000 worlds. How many ships? At least 20, sir. All the same design as the first one. All covered in those golden decorations. The communications board lit up again. Sir, Admiral Zethkar is hailing us again. On screen.
Oh.
The alien appeared again. This time wearing an even more elaborate outfit. He seemed to have changed costumes in the few minutes since their last conversation. Creatures of the insignificant world, he began. We have detected your strange battle cries echoing through the void. Your warrior spirits call to us across the darkness of space. Murphy blinked. Battle cries. He had not expected such fierce determination from such a primitive species. Your war chants speak of a people ready to fight to the last breath. Danny. Chen looked confused. War chants. We were laughing, Admiral Zethkar continued, completely unaware of the confusion he was causing. Very well, warriors of Earth, we accept your challenge. Prepare yourselves for glorious battle. May the strongest species claim victory among the stars. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other in complete bewilderment. Did he just say he thinks our laughter was a battle cry? Lisa Rodriguez asked. Murphy rubbed his forehead. I think we might have a problem. 3 days had passed since the first encounter with Admiral Zethkar. And Captain Jake Murphy was starting to understand that the situation was getting more complicated by the hour. The Zorvakian fleet had grown from 20 ships to over 50. And each new arrival brought even more dramatic displays. Oh, sir, we're getting another transmission from the alien fleet, Lisa Rodriguez announced from her communications station. This one is from someone calling himself Grand Marshal Vextel. Murphy sighed. Put it on screen. The alien that appeared this time made Admiral Zethkar look modest by comparison. Grand Marshal Vextel was enormous, standing at least 9 feet tall with 6 arms instead of 4. His armor was so elaborate it looked like he was wearing a small building. Golden chains hung from every surface, and his helmet had spikes that curved in impossible directions. Warriors of the laughing death cry, the Grand Marshal began, his voice even deeper and more dramatic than the Admiral's had been. I am Grand Marshal Vextel, Supreme Commander of the Infinite Armada, Master of 1,000,000 battles, and Herald of Cosmic Destruction. Danny Chen had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. The alien's introduction took almost 30 seconds, and he struck a new pose for each title. We have studied your fierce battle songs, Vextel continued, gesturing, with all 6 arms at once. Your war cries of joy speak of a warrior culture unlike any we have encountered in our conquest of the known galaxy. Captain Amy Thompson's voice crackled through the communications system from the USS Courage. Murphy, are you seeing this? Please tell me you're recording this. Murphy quickly muted their end of the transmission. Amy, maintain radio silence. We're still trying to figure out what they want. What they want is pretty clear, came the voice of Captain Nick Johnson from the USS Defiance. They think we're some kind of warrior race because we laughed at them. On screen, Grand Marshal Vextel was now walking in circles around what appeared to be a holographic display showing various alien worlds. Behold the glorious conquests of our empire, he announced. The crystal cities of Morthok fell before our might. The floating gardens of Zexwara trembled at our approach. The holographic display was incredibly detailed, showing battle scenes that looked like they came from the most expensive science fiction movies ever made. Explosions bloomed in slow motion, while dramatic music played in the background. Bobby Martinez, who had come to the bridge to watch the show, shook his head in amazement. They've got to be spending more energy on special effects than most planets use in a year. The warrior poets of Kalanara composed songs of our glory before surrendering their pathetic existence to our infinite wisdom, Vexel continued. Now, standing on what looked like a raised platform that had risen from the floor just for his speech, Karen White was studying her tactical displays. Sir, I'm reading massive energy buildups from their ships, but it's not weapons. They're powering up some kind of synchronized light show. As if on cue, the entire Zorvakian fleet began flashing in patterns. Golden beams of light shot between the ships, while holographic banners unfurled in space, showing various alien symbols. The display was so elaborate that it looked like a cosmic fireworks show. Your species intrigues us, warriors of Earth, Vextel announced, raising what appeared to be a sword that was glowing with its own internal light. Never before have we encountered a people who sing songs of joy before battle. Your laughter echoes through the void like the hunting calls of the cosmic wolves of Zirthok. Danny Chen leaned over to Murphy. Sir, do you think they've ever actually heard wolves? Because I'm pretty sure wolves don't laugh. The Grand Marshal was now joined by other Zorvakians, each wearing costumes that were somehow even more elaborate than his. One of them appeared to be carrying a banner that was at least 20 feet long and covered in golden tassels. We bring you greetings from Emperor Zorthok himself, master of the eternal throne, ruler of 10,000 systems, and bearer of the crown of infinite stars, Vexel announced. He has heard of your warrior songs and wishes to test your strength in glorious combat. The transmission suddenly switched to show what could only be the Emperor himself. If the previous aliens had been dramatic, Emperor Zorthok was completely over the top. His crown was so tall, it nearly touched the ceiling of what appeared to be a throne room the size of a football stadium. His robes were covered in so many jewels that he sparkled like a disco ball. Greetings, laughing warriors, the Emperor said, his voice somehow managing to be even more theatrical than his subordinates. Your battle hymns have reached across the stars to touch our imperial hearts. Murphy had to mute their transmission. Again, because his entire bridge crew was starting to giggle. The Emperor's throne appeared to be floating in midair, surrounded by holographic flames and what looked like tiny dancing figures. Sir, Lisa Rodriguez whispered, the other human ships are requesting permission to join the conversation. Captain, Thompson says her crew is taking bets on what the next alien will be wearing. Tell them to maintain their positions and keep recording everything, Murphy replied. Earth Command is going to want to see this. Back on screen, Emperor Zorthok was now standing, revealing that his robes had a train that was at least 50 feet long and required 6 other aliens to carry it. Your species has earned our respect through your fearsome laughter. We challenge your greatest warriors to prove themselves in the ancient rites of combat. The Emperor raised what appeared to be a staff that was taller than he was and covered in spinning crystals. Let your champions face our champions in glorious battle beneath the light of 1,000 suns. Danny Chen was frantically taking notes on his tablet. Sir, they keep mentioning our laughter. I think they really believe it's some kind of weapon or battle cry. We shall meet in the space between worlds, the Emperor continued, where the cosmic winds carry the songs of heroes across the void of eternity. The transmission ended with the most elaborate light show yet. The entire Zorvakian fleet synchronized their displays, creating patterns of light that stretched for miles through space. Holographic phoenixes appeared to fly between the ships, while orchestral music that sounded like it was performed by a 1,000-piece band played in the background. The bridge of the USS Liberty was quiet for a moment after the transmission. Then Karen White started laughing, followed by Bobby Martinez, and soon the entire crew was in hysterics. "Did you see that throne?" Lisa Rodriguez gasped between laughs. It was floating and on fire at the same time. And the crown, Danny Chen added, wiping tears from his eyes. "How does he even hold his head up with that thing on?" Captain Thompson's voice came through the communications system again. "Murphy, my tactical officer, just calculated that they're using enough energy for their light shows to power a small city." Here came Captain Johnson's voice from the Defiance. "My science team thinks they're using some kind of gravity manipulation just to make their capes float dramatically." Murphy tried to compose himself. "People, we need to remember that these aliens have conquered 1,000 worlds. Ridiculous or not, they're clearly powerful," Sir Danny Chin said, checking his sensor readings. "More ships are approaching. Long-range sensors show at least 100 vessels heading our way." 100? Murphy felt his amusement fade a bit. "Are they all the same design?" "Negative, sir. These new ships are even bigger and more elaborate. I'm reading massive energy signatures from weapon systems, but also from what appears to be decorative systems." Lisa Rodriguez looked up from her station. "Sir, we're receiving another transmission. This one is from someone calling himself Supreme Warbard Kexel, voice of the Emperor's will, singer of battle songs, and keeper of the sacred war drums." "War drums?" Bobby Martinez asked. "They have war drums in space?" "Put it on screen," Murphy ordered, though he was starting to wonder if his crew would be able to maintain any dignity during another alien performance. The new alien appeared on screen, and somehow managed to be even more ridiculous than the previous ones. He was surrounded by what appeared to be floating drums that were playing themselves while golden lightning danced around his 12-armed form. "Warriors whose laughter strikes fear into the hearts of cowards," the warbard began. "We bring you the sacred challenge of the drum song of eternal combat." Murphy looked around his bridge at his crew, who were all struggling not to laugh at the sight of an alien surrounded by floating space drums. He had a feeling this was going to be a very long first contact. Diplomatic officer Helen Brooks had arrived from Earth Central Command aboard the USS Horizon just in time to witness Supreme Warbard Kexel's performance with the floating drums. She stood on the bridge of Captain Jake Murphy's ship, watching the alien's 12 arms conduct an orchestra of self-playing instruments. While he chanted about cosmic battles and eternal glory, "Captain Murphy," Helen said quietly, "please tell me you have recordings of all these encounters." "Every single second," Murphy replied. "Earth's command is going to have a field day with this." Helen had spent 15 years in diplomatic service and had prepared for many possible first contact scenarios. None of her training had covered what to do when aliens mistake human laughter for a declaration of war. "Warriors of the Laughing Death Song," Warbard Kexele announced, his voice somehow harmonizing with the floating drums. "Your battle hymns have inspired our greatest composers to create new songs of combat. Behold the symphony of approaching doom." What followed was the most elaborate musical performance any human had ever witnessed. The warbard's drums were joined by floating harps, horns that glowed with inner fire, and what appeared to be a full orchestra of holographic musicians. The music was actually quite beautiful, if completely over the top. Danny Chen leaned over. "To Helen, ma'am, they keep calling our laughter battle songs and war hymns. I think they genuinely believe that's what laughter is for." Helen nodded thoughtfully. "I brought some cultural exchange materials from Earth. Maybe if we show them examples of human entertainment, they'll understand that laughter isn't aggressive." "Ma'am," Lisa Rodriguez interrupted, "we're getting a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Peterson wants to speak with you directly." "Put him through on a secure channel," Helen ordered. Admiral Peterson's face appeared on a smaller screen. He looked tired and confused. "Brooks, what in the world is happening out there? We've got reports of an alien fleet that thinks we're warriors because we laugh, and they're challenging us to some kind of cosmic battle. That's an accurate summary, sir, Helen replied. The Zorvakians appear to have built their entire culture around dramatic presentations and elaborate declarations of power. They've never encountered laughter as an expression of amusement. Well, figure it out fast, Peterson said. We're getting reports of more alien fleets heading toward human space. They seem to think we're some kind of warrior civilization that uses laughter as a battle cry. The transmission ended just as Warbard Kextel finished his symphony. The alien stood amid his floating instruments, all 12 arms raised dramatically as the final notes echoed through space. We await your response, laughing warriors, he declared. Let your battle songs answer our challenge across the void of eternity. Helen stepped forward. Captain Murphy, open a channel. I'm going to try something. You're on, Murphy said. Greetings, Warbard Kexthal, Helen began, using her most diplomatic voice. I am Diplomatic Officer Helen Brooks, representing the people of Earth. We are honored by your musical presentation. The alien tilted his head, apparently surprised to hear a different human voice. A new warrior joins the laughing army. Do you bring fresh battle songs to add to your war hymns? Actually, Helen said carefully, I'd like to share some examples of human culture with you. We have brought gifts that might help you understand our people better. She gestured to Danny Chen, who began uploading files to their transmission system. These are examples of human entertainment. What you call battle songs, we call comedy. Laughter is how we express joy and amusement. The first file Helen transmitted was a compilation of human comedy shows, stand-up comedians, funny movies, and sitcoms began playing on the Zorvakian screens. The Warbard and his crew watched in fascination as humans on screen laughed at jokes, funny situations, and each other. Fascinating, Warbard, Kexel said, studying the footage. Your warriors, trained by observing the battle techniques of their comedy masters. These humans demonstrate advanced psychological warfare methods. Helen blinked. I'm sorry, what? See how they use vocal disruption patterns to disorient their opponents? The Warbard explained, pointing at a comedian telling jokes, and observe how the audience responds with synchronized battle cries. Your species has developed laughter into a sophisticated weapon system. Danny Chen covered his face with his hands. They think stand-up comedy is military training? The Warbard was now taking notes on a glowing tablet. Human called Jerry Seinfeld appears to be a master of verbal combat. His technique of asking questions about everyday situations clearly confuses his enemies into submission. No, Helen said quickly. Jerry Seinfeld is a comedian. He makes people laugh because his observations are funny, not because he's fighting them. But the Warbard wasn't listening. He was too busy analyzing what he thought were human battle tactics. And this human called Robin Williams demonstrates rapid-fire psychological assault techniques. His ability to change voices and characters must devastate enemy morale. Helen tried a different approach. She transmitted recordings of human children laughing while playing, families laughing together at dinner, and friends laughing while hanging out. Look at these examples. These humans are not fighting. They're happy. Laughter is an expression of happiness. Warbard Kextel studied the new footage carefully. His expression grew more confused with each clip. Strange. These young warriors appear to be practicing their combat techniques through play fighting. And these adult warriors seem to be bonding before joint missions by sharing their laughter weapons. Sir, came a new voice from the Zorvakian ship. I am Commander Zixmal. Intelligence Analysis, Officer of the Imperial Fleet. We have been studying these human transmissions extensively. A new alien appeared on screen, wearing slightly less elaborate armor, but covered in what appeared to be scientific instruments. Our analysis indicates that humans have weaponized emotional responses in ways we have never encountered. Commander? Zixmal pulled up holographic displays showing charts and graphs. Human laughter appears to serve multiple military functions. First, it serves as intimidation, warning enemies of their combat readiness. Second, it builds unit cohesion among human warriors. Third, it appears to be used for psychological warfare against opponents. Helen felt a headache coming on. Commander, laughter isn't a weapon. It's just something humans do when they find things funny or amusing. Precisely, Commander Zixmel said, nodding sagely. You have evolved to find combat situations amusing. This makes your species uniquely adapted for warfare. Most civilizations find battle stressful, but humans appear to find it entertaining. Bobby Martinez, who had been listening from the engineering station, muttered, They think we're a species of warrior comedians. The situation got worse when more human ships arrived in the area. Captain Steve Davis of the USS Explorer and Captain Patricia Wong of the USS Discovery had both been monitoring the communications, and their crews were having the same reaction. As everyone else, they couldn't stop laughing at the aliens' dramatic performances. Captain Murphy, came Steve Davis's voice over the comm. Are you seeing the new ship that just showed up in their fleet? It's shaped like a giant golden eagle, and it's actually flapping its wings in space. The comment was picked up by the Zorvakian Communications, and Warbard Kexel immediately interpreted it as tactical analysis. Excellent observation, human warrior. You have identified the sacred war eagle of Supreme Battle Commander Tolvek. Your reconnaissance skills are impressive. Patricia Wong's voice joined the conversation. The Eagle ship is playing music. I can hear it through our sensors. It sounds like a mix between classical music and heavy metal. The battle song of the Eternal Eagle, Warbard Kextal explained proudly. It has inspired fear in 1,000 conquered worlds. What the Warbard didn't realize was that Captain Wong's crew was recording the music and turning it into remixes that they were sharing with the other human ships. Navigation Officer Tony Rodriguez had already started a shipwide betting pool on what ridiculous thing the aliens would do next. Helen tried one more approach. Warbard Kextal, what if I told you that humans laugh at themselves just as much as we laugh at others? We're not trying to intimidate you. We genuinely find your presentations entertaining, but not in a hostile way. The Warbard considered this. Ah, you mean your species practices self-directed psychological conditioning? By using laughter weapons on yourselves, you build immunity. 2 enemy attempts at emotional warfare. Brilliant. Helen looked around the bridge at the human crew, all of whom were staring at her with expressions of complete bewilderment. I think we're going to need a different approach, Ma'am Lisa Rodriguez said quietly. More Zorvakian ships are arriving. Sensors show they're bringing what appears to be mobile entertainment systems. Entertainment systems? Helen asked. Seem to think this is some kind of cultural combat exchange, Danny Chen explained. They're bringing their own performances to match what they think are our battle demonstrations. Through the view screen, they could see the new Zorvakian ships deploying massive holographic stages in space. Hundreds of aliens in elaborate costumes were preparing for what looked like the most overthought performance in galactic history. Helen sighed. This is going to be a long day. The space around the human fleet had become the strangest battlefield anyone had ever seen. Emperor Zorthok himself had arrived with what could only be described as a floating city. The Imperial flagship was so massive, it had its own artificial gravity fields, and so covered in golden decorations that it looked like someone had dumped an entire planet's worth of treasure onto a spaceship. Captain Jake Murphy stood on his bridge, watching in amazement as the Emperor's ship deployed what appeared to be a stadium in space. Massive holographic screens materialized around the area, while orchestras of floating instruments began playing music that could be heard through their ship's sensors. Sir, Danny Chen reported, staring at his readings in disbelief there. Using enough energy to power Earth for a month just for this light show? Captain Murphy, came the voice of Captain Larry Anderson from the USS Intrepid, which had just arrived with reinforcements. Please tell me someone is recording this. My grandchildren will never believe it otherwise. Captain Michelle Taylor from the USS Venture chimed in over the comm. Larry, my science officer thinks they're actually bending space-time just to make their capes flow more dramatically. Emperor Zorthok himself appeared on every screen in the human fleet simultaneously. His crown had somehow grown even taller since his last appearance, and now required a floating platform just to support its weight. His robes had been replaced with what looked like liquid starlight that flowed and sparkled around him. Warriors of the infinite laughter, the Emperor announced, his voice booming across space with the power of a dozen thunderstorms. You have proven yourselves worthy opponents through your fearsome battle hymns. Helen Brooks, still aboard Murphy's ship, had given up trying to explain that laughter wasn't a weapon. She was now taking detailed notes for what would probably be the most unusual first contact report in human history. We challenge your greatest champion to face our mightiest warrior in the ancient ritual of single combat, Emperor Zorthok declared, striking a pose that somehow involved all four of his arms pointing in different directions while his cape billowed in a non-existent wind. Ancient ritual, Captain? Greg Wilson's voice came through from the USS Defender. How ancient can it be if they're doing it in space, with floating stages and holographic audiences? The Emperor continued his proclamation, apparently unaware of the human commentary. Let your finest warrior step forward to face Champion Morgak, the unconquerable, slayer of 10,000 foes, master of the 17 fighting arts, and keeper of the sacred battle axe of cosmic justice. A new figure appeared on the screens, and even by Zorvakian standards, Champion Morgak was impressive. He stood 12 feet tall, had 8 arms, and wore armor that looked like it was forged from solid lightning. His weapon was indeed an axe, but one that appeared to be made of crystallized energy and was larger than most human shuttlecraft. "Oh, come on," muttered Bobby Martinez from his engineering station. "An axe made of energy? What's next? A sword made of pure gravity?" Champion Morgak began demonstrating his fighting skills on the floating stage. He moved with surprising grace for someone his size, spinning his massive axe in patterns that created trails of light through space around him, and he cut through them with moves that looked like they came from the most elaborate martial arts movie ever made. Sir Karen White reported from Tactical. "I'm reading massive energy discharges from that axe. It's not just for show. That thing could probably cut through our hull like paper." Emperor Zorthok raised his staff, which had somehow acquired even more crystals since his last appearance. "Choose your champion, laughing warriors. Let them face our greatest in combat beneath the light of 10,000 burning stars." Murphy looked around his bridge. They had dozens of ships and thousands of crew members, but none of them were warriors in the sense the aliens meant. They were explorers, scientists, engineers, and diplomats. Captain Helen said quietly, "We need to send someone, but we can't send them to fight that thing. Maybe we can find another way to resolve this." "Sir," came a new voice over the comm. It was Lieutenant Commander Paul Johnson from the USS Liberty's sister ship, the USS Freedom. "I volunteer to face their champion." Murphy knew Paul Johnson. He was a former high school drama teacher who had joined the space service late in life. He wasn't a fighter, but he had spent years dealing with teenagers, which might actually be good preparation for this situation. "Paul, that alien could probably bench press a shuttle," Murphy said. "What's your plan?" "Trust me, Captain. I've got an idea." An hour later, Paul Johnson stood on a floating platform in space, wearing a standard EVA suit and carrying no weapons. Across from him, Champion Morgak loomed like a mountain of muscle and energy, his cosmic axe crackling with power. The Emperor had positioned his entire fleet in a circle around the combat area, creating an arena lit by the combined glow of hundreds of ships. Holographic cameras captured every angle while dramatic music played from unseen speakers. "Let the ancient ritual begin," Emperor Zorthok announced. "May the strongest warrior claim victory and bring honor to their people." Champion Morgak raised his axe and charged across the platform with a roar that could probably be heard on nearby planets. His 8 arms moved in perfect coordination, spinning the energy weapon in deadly patterns as he closed the distance. To his human opponent, Paul Johnson did something completely unexpected. He started telling jokes. "So this Zorvakian walks into a space bar," Paul began, his voice amplified by his suit speakers, and the bartender says, "Why the long face?" And the Zorvakian says, "It's not long, it's just dramatically proportioned." "Champion." Morgak stumbled, his perfect attack pattern disrupted by confusion. He had faced many enemies in his career, but none had ever told jokes while he was trying to kill them. Paul continued, casually stepping aside as the massive axe swept past him. "I've got to ask, do you guys get tired carrying all that armor around? Because my back hurts just looking at you." The champion tried another attack, but Paul's completely relaxed attitude was throwing him off. This human should be screaming in terror, or at least trying to fight back, not making casual observations about fashion choices. And another thing, Paul said, pointing at the Emperor's fleet who designed those ships. I mean, they're beautiful, don't get me wrong, but did you really need the golden spikes? What happens when you try to dock? You have to be careful not to poke holes in the space station. Something remarkable happened. Champion Morgak started laughing. It began as a small chuckle at Paul's comment about the spikes, because honestly, docking was a problem they had never solved properly. The laughter grew as Paul continued his routine, making gentle fun of everything from the Emperor's enormous crown to the floating instruments that required constant tuning. "Stop," Champion Morgak said, lowering his axe. "Stop. You're making me laugh too hard to fight properly." Entire Zorvakian fleet fell silent. Their greatest champion had just admitted he couldn't fight because he was laughing too much. Paul Johnson grinned inside his helmet. "That's the point, big guy. Fighting isn't the only way to solve problems." Emperor Zorthok was staring at his champion in confusion. "Morgak, what is happening? Why have you stopped the combat?" "Your Majesty," the champion said, still chuckling. "This human isn't using laughter as a weapon. He's sharing it as a gift, and it feels... nice." Dr. Susan Parker, who had been watching from the USS Liberty's medical bay, spoke into her CUM unit. "Captain Murphy, I think we might be witnessing a breakthrough here." On the floating platform, Paul Johnson was now sitting cross-legged, having somehow convinced Champion Morgak to sit down as well. The massive alien had put aside his energy axe and was listening to more of Paul's stories about life on Earth. "No. There I was," Paul was saying, trying to explain Shakespeare to a classroom full of 16-year-olds who thought Romeo and Juliet was a dating app. One kid asked me if Hamlet was available on streaming services. Champion Morgak was laughing so hard his armor was shaking. "Your young warriors are trained in literature as well as combat. They're not warriors," Paul explained gently. "They're just kids trying to figure out life. And Romeo and Juliet isn't about combat, it's about love." "Love?" the champion asked, tilting his massive head. "Yeah, you know, when two people care about each other so much, they want to spend their lives together. It's one of the things that makes humans happy." Emperor Zorthok had been listening to this conversation with growing confusion. "Champion Morgak, are you saying this human defeated you with stories about young love?" "Not defeated, Your Majesty," Morgak replied. "He showed me something I had never experienced before. Joy without conquest, laughter without victory, happiness that doesn't come from defeating enemies." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Around him, his entire fleet waited to see what would happen next. The most powerful ruler in the known galaxy was trying to understand concepts he had never encountered before. "This human Emperor, Zorthok said slowly, has won the combat without fighting." "I guess you could say that," Paul replied, "but I don't think anyone lost here. We both learned something new." Helen Brooks smiled as she watched the scene unfold. Maybe there was hope for this first contact after all. The floating platform where Paul Johnson and Champion Morgak sat had become the center of attention for both fleets. Emperor Zorthok watched from his massive throne ship as his greatest warrior continued to laugh at the human stories about Earth life. So this student, Paul was saying, raises his hand and asks me, "Mr. Johnson, if Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark, why doesn't he just call the police about his dad's murder?" I had to explain that they didn't have police departments. In medieval times, Champion Morgak was holding his sides, his massive frame shaking with laughter. "Your young ones ask such practical questions. Our young warriors are taught only to ask, how can we conquer this? Or what is the most dramatic way to approach battle?" "It sounds exhausting," Paul replied. "Don't you ever just want to relax and enjoy things?" The champion paused, his laughter fading to a thoughtful expression. "I do not understand what you mean by relax." Paul looked around at the elaborate fleet surrounding them, with their constant light shows and dramatic music. "When do you get to just be yourselves, without all the performances and the declarations and the cosmic this and eternal that?" Emperor Zorthok had been listening to this conversation with growing confusion. He activated his communications to speak directly to the platform. "Champion Morgak, explain to us what this human means." Your Majesty, Morgak said, standing up slowly. I think this human is suggesting that we might not need to be so dramatic about everything. The Emperor's forearms gestured wildly. Not dramatic. But how would anyone know of our power and glory if we are not dramatic? Maybe. Paul suggested gently. People could know you're powerful without all the golden spikes and floating capes. Maybe they could respect you for being helpful instead of scary. Captain Jake Murphy watched this conversation from his bridge, hardly believing what he was seeing. A former high school teacher was giving life advice to the ruler of a galactic empire, sir. Danny Chen whispered. I think Paul's actually getting through to them. On the Emperor's ship, other Zorvakians were gathering to listen to the conversation. For the first time in their imperial history, someone was suggesting, there might be ways to live that didn't involve constant declarations of supremacy. But if we are not dramatically proclaiming our greatness, asked Warbard Kextel, how will the galaxy know we exist? Paul said. You could try being friends with people instead of conquering them. Friends tend to talk about each other. In nice ways. Friends. Emperor Zorthok repeated the word like he was trying to understand a foreign concept. Explain this friend's idea. Paul thought for a moment. Friends are people who like spending time together. They help each other, they share things, and they enjoy each other's company. So they laugh together, but not because anyone won or lost anything. They laugh because they're happy. Helen Brooks spoke quietly into her cum unit. All ships, maintain positions, and keep recording. This might be the most important conversation in human history. Now Morgak was nodding slowly. When you told those stories about your students, you seemed fond of them. Even when they asked silly questions or didn't understand things. Of course, Paul said, they were learning. Making mistakes is part of learning. I wasn't their enemy trying to defeat them. I was their teacher trying to help them. Teacher, the Emperor repeated. Another strange concept. We have trainers who prepare warriors for battle, but this teacher idea is different. Teachers help people become better versions of themselves, Paul explained. Not better at fighting, just better at being who they are. Admiral Zethkar, who had started this whole encounter, spoke up from his ship. But human, your species, laughed at our glorious presentations. Were you not mocking our power? Paul scratched his head inside his helmet. Well, honestly, yes, we were laughing at you, but not in a mean way. You guys are just so over the top about everything. It's like watching someone try to order coffee by declaring themselves the supreme commander of caffeine consumption. The silence that followed was so complete that the only sound was the ambient hum of ship engines. Then, unexpectedly, Emperor Zorthok started to chuckle. Supreme Commander of Caffeine Consumption, he repeated. That does sound rather silly. When you put it that way. The chuckle grew into a laugh, and soon the Emperor was laughing harder than any of his subjects had ever seen. By the cosmic winds, he gasped between laughs. We do sound rather ridiculous, don't we? That broke the dam. Across the Zorvakian fleet, aliens who had spent their entire lives being as dramatic as possible began to laugh at themselves. Warbard. Kexel was giggling at his floating instruments. Admiral Zethkar was chuckling at his own cape. Even the serious Commander Zixmel was smiling at his elaborate charts and graphs. Your Majesty, Champion Morgak said, still grinning, perhaps? The humans are right. Perhaps we have been taking ourselves too seriously. Emperor Zorthok stood up from his floating throne, and for the first time, he didn't strike a dramatic pose. He just stood there, like a normal person. You know what, Champion? I think you might be correct, Cultural Exchange Officer Maria Santos, who had arrived with the latest wave of human ships, opened a communication channel. Emperor Zorthok, on behalf of humanity, we would like to offer you something we call friendship. Friendship, the Emperor repeated, tasting the word. What does this friendship involve? Well, Maria said, friends help each other, share ideas, learn from each other, and generally try to make each other's lives better. No conquering required. We would still be allowed to have nice ships and beautiful art, asked the Emperor, gesturing at his elaborate fleet. Of course, Paul Johnson laughed from the platform. He just might not need quite so many golden spikes. Emperor Zorthok looked around at his massive fleet with its countless decorative elements and energy-wasting light shows. Maintaining All these decorations is terribly expensive, and the spikes do make docking problematic. Over the next several hours, something unprecedented happened in galactic history. The Zorvakian Empire and humanity began to actually talk to each other. Not dramatic declarations or battle challenges, it's just conversation. The Zorvakians learned about human movies, music, sports, and the concept of doing things just for fun. The humans learned about Zorvakian art, their incredible engineering abilities, and their genuine desire to make the galaxy a better place, even if their methods had been questionable. So you conquer worlds to bring them your superior technology and culture? Captain Michelle Taylor asked during one exchange. Well, yes, replied Admiral Zethkar, sounding slightly embarrassed. We assumed everyone would want our guidance. Did you ever think to ask first? There was a long pause. Ask, like, hey, would you like some help with your technology? Instead of surrender to our infinite might, said the Admiral quietly. That would have been simpler, wouldn't it? 3 days later, the first human-Zorvakian friendship treaty was signed in a ceremony that was still dramatic, but in a celebratory way rather than a threatening one. The Zorvakians had toned down their ship decorations to only moderately ridiculous levels, while still maintaining their love of beautiful art and impressive displays. Emperor Zorthok's crown was now only twice his height instead of 3 times, stood before both fleets to make his declaration. People of Earth and citizens of the Zorvakian Empire, he began, then paused and smiled. Friends, this marks the beginning of a new age of cooperation and mutual laughter. Mutual laughter? Asked Captain Murphy. Yes, the Emperor replied, grinning. We have decided that if you are going to laugh at us, we might as well learn too. Laugh with you. Perhaps you might laugh at some of our jokes as well. Do you know any jokes? Asked Paul Johnson. Emperor Zorthok cleared his throat dramatically, then caught himself and spoke normally. Wow. Why did the Zorvakian cross the galaxy? Why? To dramatically proclaim his arrival on the other side. The joke was terrible by human standards, but it was delivered with such sincere effort that the entire human fleet burst into genuine, appreciative laughter. It's not because it was funny, but because the Emperor was trying so hard to share their sense of humor. That was awful, Paul Johnson said, still laughing. I love it. And so began the strangest friendship in galactic history, built on the understanding that sometimes the best way to make friends is to learn to laugh at yourself. The Zorvakians never did completely give up their love of drama, but they learned to use it for celebration rather than intimidation. As for the humans, they gained allies who could build ships shaped like golden eagles and make capes float in space. Sometimes, they admitted, little drama made life more interesting. The final message of the day came from Emperor Zorthok to the human fleet. Thank you for teaching us that laughter is not a weapon, but a gift. Oh! We look forward to sharing many more gifts in the years to come, and across both fleets, humans and Zorvakians laughed together under the light of the stars.